We're reading The Road to Paris, Chapter 25, Word. For once, Viola kept her word. She made arrangements for the two of them to visit Malcolm. She had Paris take the train down to Dobbs Ferry and met her at the station. A short taxi ride later, and mother and daughter were on the grounds of St. Christopher's Home for Children. An attendant directed them to the visitors' lounge, then sent word to Malcolm's house mother that they had arrived. Paris sat on the edge of a chair, drumming her thighs anxiously as she waited. The minute Malcolm crossed the threshold of the entryway, Paris flew into his arms. They stood there, holding each other, until other visitors were forced to squeeze by. Malcolm looked over his sister's shoulder and nodded hello to Viola. She nodded back. "Go on," she said, motioning toward the door that led to a small picnic area. "I'll join you two later." Hand in hand, brother and sister walked into the sunshine. They found a table cloaked in shade and sat opposite one another. Paris kept staring at her brother to make sure she wasn't dreaming. "I missed you, Malcolm," said Paris. "I missed you too, Squirt." Paris wore a smile bright as a 4th of July sparkler at first, but the smile faded as she noticed a hardness in her brother's face that hadn't been there before. "How are you, Malcolm?" Paris asked. Malcolm shrugged, lowering his eyes. "I'm okay," he said. "It's not so bad here." His voice told Paris something different. "The room I stay in is kind of crowded. There are 3 other guys in it besides me." He shrugged again. "It could be worse. I'll tell you one thing, though. The food here stinks." They both laughed at that. Paris and Malcolm had shared some pretty awful meals together at the Boones, not to mention those disasters Malcolm tried to make for the two of them when Viola was AWOL, back in the city. Once, Malcolm had dished up some uncooked oatmeal with buttermilk. Yuck. "Forget about me," said Malcolm. "Tell me about you." And so Paris told him about the house on the hill, about Jet, about Ashley, about school, about how she tricked the psychologist with that stupid ink blot test, about the choir, about her Easter dress. She even told him about the letter she wrote to him when she first got to Ossining. Paris rambled on and didn't stop until she saw something in her brother's face break open. She watched as the beginnings of a familiar smile took shape. "What is it?" asked Paris. "He listened," whispered Malcolm. "Who?" "God," said Malcolm, looking up. "I bugged him every single day since I got here. I bugged him to look out for you, to take care of my little sister. And he listened." Paris and Malcolm locked eyes. She was relieved to see a bit of the old Malcolm shining through. She reached across the table and took her brother's hand. "You've just got to keep God in your pocket, and everything will be all right," said Paris. "What?" Paris pursed her lips, trying to figure out how to explain what she meant. "Put your hands in your pocket," she said. "Paris?" "Go on." "Okay, now what?" "Pretend that God is there. See? You stick your hand in your pocket and remind yourself that God's always close by, and you can talk to him whenever you need to," said Paris. Malcolm nodded. "I get it. Keep God in your pocket. Cool," he said. "I'll give that a try. Thanks, little sister." "You're welcome," said Paris. "But I'm not so little anymore." Malcolm threw his head back and laughed. "You got that right." "What's so funny?" asked Viola, joining them at last. "Nothing," they said in unison. "You two can't fool me. You've got that look, like you've been sharing deep, dark secrets. I've seen that look before. You're up to something." Paris and Malcolm grinned at each other. They liked being up to something good. Well, that's the end of chapter 25. And Paris and Malcolm are finally united, even though it's just for a little while during this visit. So that makes them both happy. Well, we're going to continue our journey in the road to Paris in chapter 26. So hang in there with me. Join me again for chapter 26. We are reading The Road to Paris, chapter 26, Easter Sunday. Paris tried her best not to let on how excited she was about Easter, but when the day rolled around, she used every drop of hot water in the house to take a shower that went on forever. She even washed behind her ears twice, without being told. When she was sure God himself could not have found a speck of dirt on her, she toweled off and hurried to her bedroom to dress. She'd chosen the right dress, no doubt about it. But Paris frowned at her reflection in the mirror. She'd have to do something with her hair. Maybe Mrs. Lincoln could help. Paris went down to the master bedroom and knocked on the door. "Hold on," said Mr. Lincoln. A few seconds later he opened the door a crack. "Morning, Paris. Oh, I see you're dressed already. I'm moving kind of slow myself. I need to see Mom," Paris blurted out. "I think she left early, dear. She said something about helping to set the doughnuts out and getting the coffee started. You can check." Paris never heard the rest. Not ready to give up, she ran to Erletta's room and knocked. "Is Mom in there?" she called through the door. "No, Mom is not here," snapped Erletta, clearly annoyed. After a long pause, Paris asked, "Are you sure?" Arlene stuck her head out the door and studied Paris carefully. The girl looked miserable. "Why are you looking for Mom?" Paris grabbed a hank of hair and held it away from her scalp. "This," she said. "I don't know what to do with it. Most days," Paris simply pulled her hair back into a ponytail. But today was special, and she wanted her hair to be special too. Arletta sighed, opening her door wider. "Come in and sit down," she said. "Not on my bed, on the chair." Paris did as she was told, awed by the invitation into Arletta's private world. Arletta never let anyone in there. "Are you tender-headed?" asked Arletta. Paris shook her head no. "All right, then, sit still." Arletta ran a comb through Paris's hair first, pulling out the tangles. Then she brushed it from front to back, in a slow, easy rhythm that almost put Paris to sleep. "Just as well you came to me anyway," said Arletta. "Mom's no good at hair, in case you haven't figured that out already. She's used to boys. I should know. I was the first girl in this house. They had 4 foster kids before me, all boys." No wonder, thought Paris. That's why Mom lets me do my own hair. She doesn't know how. "Be right back," said Arletta, handing the brush to Paris. She left the room and came back a minute later holding a length of seafoam green ribbon, the same color as Paris's dress. What's she gonna do with that? Paris wondered. "Okay, hold your head still," said Arletta. Paris braced herself against the back of the chair until Arletta was done. When she finished, Arletta gave Paris a hand mirror. "Go and look in the full-length mirror on the back of my door," she said. "That way you can see how your hair looks in the back." What Paris saw was a perfect French braid, every single hair tucked in place, with the length of ribbon woven through it. Paris squealed, dropped the mirror on the bed, and threw her arms around Arletta's waist. "Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you," said Paris. "Get off me, girl," said Arletta, pushing Paris away. But Paris noticed that Arletta's voice was softer than her words. "I've got to get ready for church, too, you know." Paris backed away, smiling, and left the room feeling ready for her big day. Mr. Lincoln finished dressing, then drove them all to the church. Paris stood on the front steps a while, turning her head this way and that to make sure everyone noticed her French braid. Then she realized Mrs. Lincoln hadn't seen her all dressed up, so Paris hurried to the church dining room in the basement to find her. Mrs. Lincoln wasn't one to ooh and ah, but when she saw Paris, she gave a nod of approval and said, "Nice, very nice." Paris stood there preening until she heard the organ music, which reminded her that it was time to join the choir lining up outside of the sanctuary, preparing to march in. The youth choir marched in first, their faces gleaming like starshine. The congregation was on its feet, a swaying rainbow of yellow and hot pink, turquoise and royal blue, peach and purple, and here and there a shot of orange. Then there were the flowers. There were so many on hat bands, it seemed, as there were lilies adorning the altar. Once in place, the combined choirs opened with, "Were you there?" when they moved on to "Christ the Lord is risen today." All the voices of the congregation rose, too. Easter arrived at Star of Bethlehem with a shout. The pastor came forward and led the church in prayer. Then the scripture was read, and the pastor announced the title of his sermon, "The Flip Side of the Crucifixion." That was about all Paris heard. After that, her mind was busy running over the lines of her song, her first ever solo. The last thing she wanted was to mess it up. If that happened, Paris knew she would absolutely die. Before Paris knew it, the adult choir director was nodding her toward her. She looked back at him, confused, until he waved her forward, motioning toward the microphone. In that very moment, Paris went blank. Her feet were rooted to the floor. She couldn't move. "Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no," thought Paris. Her heart beat wildly against her rib cage. Every particle of air left the room. Paris thought she would faint. Then she heard a voice whisper, "It's all right, Paris. Calm down." Malcolm? thought Paris. She couldn't be sure, but she felt her heart beat slow. She took a deep breath and felt a little stronger. She smoothed the skirt of her dress, feeling for a pocket that wasn't there. Paris started to panic again, but then she remembered. "It's pretend," she told herself, and she closed her eyes, slipped her hand into her pretend pocket, and reminded herself that God was near, as close as her hand in her pocket. Paris looked up at the congregation and walked calmly to the microphone. She stood straight, opened her mouth, and found the words of the song there, waiting for her. Paris sang. The next thing she knew, the congregation was on its feet, applauding. After the service, people kept coming up to her and saying things like, "Child, the Lord sure did bless you with a voice," and "You keep on singing, baby. God bless you." Even Arletta came up to Paris and whispered in her ear, "You are the best one up there." The whole while, David stuck close, slinging his arm across her shoulders. "She sure can sing, can't she?" said David. "And you know why? Because talent runs in the family. I told you she's my sister, right?" "Mine too," piped up Jordan. Paris couldn't stop grinning. Well, that's the end of our chapter 26. And what a wonderful gift on Easter to be able to exercise her talent. So Paris had a great day and she looked beautiful. So let's find out what happens to Paris next in chapter 27. So stick with me and come along this journey, the road to Paris, in our next chapter.